Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whichever time zone you find yourself currently in. It's a great pleasure and an honor seeing you today again for this final webinar for Law of Treaties. A very warm welcome on behalf of the United Nations Institute for Training and Research and the University for Peace. Without much further ado, I think it's time for our highly esteemed expert, Christian, to take the floor. Should you have any questions or queries during his presentation, kindly use the chat box or the raise hand function, and we'll call on you as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Sabrina. Hello, how are you? All the students, I'm very happy to see you all again in this final webinar. We are a little few this time, no? How many we are? 8, 9. So, well, welcome back to this second and final webinar. First of all, I would like to thank UNITAR and the University of Peace for inviting me to participate in this wonderful course. Especially, I would like to thank Sabrina for the organization and the support during this course. Viviana, also, thank you very much. And I would like to thank the students, because at the beginning of this course, in the first webinar, I was a little bit concerned about the topic, because law of the treaty, as we talked before, is a rather dry, perhaps too formal, too legalistic topic of law. And I was a little bit concerned that maybe the subject was a little bit boring or difficult to understand. But nothing of that happened, because your participation during the forums was excellent, was very good. Not only the arguments that you have, submitted and discussed with your classmates were very well founded and reasoned, but also because occasionally I saw even passion in your answers. In some of the topics that we discussed, I could see a really passionate discussion. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy for your interest, for your genuine interest, and your active participation in this course. Okay, so we will arrange the last webinar into two parts. First, we will very briefly go through, very briefly discuss the last topic, which is state successions to treaties. And then I would like to save the second part of the seminar to talk with you, or to discuss with you again about the final paper. What is your topic? If you have any doubt about your final paper, if you want to ask me more questions. Some of you have sent me emails asking me about the final paper, but let's take this opportunity to discuss again about that. As we did in the previous case, in the previous webinar, let's try to have a sort of dialogue class. So whatever question you have, just raise your hand and ask me a question, or if you need clarification or you would like to comment on some point or to bring an example, just let's try to have this in a very fluid manner. Okay, let's begin. We will discuss, after having gone through the whole syllabus, what is a treaty, treaties as one of the sources of international law, the whole treaty-making process, the relationship between international law and national law, the problems arising from the interpretation and application of treaties, the application of treaties in the territory, the problem of applying successive treaties. We have discussed also the relationship between international intergovernmental organizations and treaties. Now we will discuss the state succession to treaties, which is a very interesting topic within international law and within treaty law. So what is your idea? What is the content of this subject? State succession to treaties. What do you think this we will discuss in this during this webinar? Please, Juan.
Well, basically, when you have a state that doesn't exist any longer, but that in the same place there is a succession state to which law it is applicable. Like, for example, before it used to be Serbia and Montenegro. Serbia and Montenegro became two separate states. To which one of these states it is applicable the treaty that it was signed before.
Exactly, exactly. Any other idea? So state succession to treaties deals basically with or try to answer the question of what happened when a new state is created, when a new state is born. Are the treaties that were applicable to the old state are still applicable to the new state? In other words, are the treaties that were applicable to the former state are still applicable to the new state? Are the rights and obligations that belong to the former state still applicable to the new state? That is the key question that the state succession to treaties try to solve. Any example that, in addition to the example that Juan just gave us, an example of state succession? For example, when Eritrea, you remember Eritrea, separated from Ethiopia, there was one single state, Ethiopia, and then a new state was born out of Ethiopia, which was Eritrea. What happened with the treaties that were in force in Ethiopia? The treaties that Ethiopia has signed, has entered into, are still applicable to Eritrea or not? That is the, please. I believe I heard a question. No, okay. So that's the key point that state succession to treaties try to answer. As presented this way, you know, I can see your faces that what is this about? Perhaps I switch off the camera and go for a coffee. It seems that it will be a very bored class. But no, let's try to put a little bit of flesh into these formal concepts. So we will begin by going through a very quick historical review of this problem of state successions to treaties. And we can classify, you know, let's say the history. The problem of state succession is relatively new in international law. It goes back only 100 years. The whole discussion on the state succession started only 100 years ago. 100 years perhaps sounds a little bit too long, but we have been discussing some issues of international law that goes back 500 to 1,200 years ago. So we may classify this problem of state succession into three main periods or three main waves of state succession. The first period, the first wave, begins immediately after the First World War, with the breakup, with the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That, as you may recall, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was a big empire in Central Europe that, after the First World War, break up into many different countries. For example, what is currently Austria and Hungary, of course, but also what is now the Czech Republic, Slovenia, Slovakia, part of southern Poland, even a little part of northern Italy. So this was one of the first international legal problems related to state succession, the breakup of the Austrian Empire. Also, at this same time, at this very after the First World War, also the Ottoman Empire broke up into what is now Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, and most of the countries of the Middle East and part of Northern Africa. So we had formerly one empire, one big state that after the war became a number of states. And after the First World War, history did not only saw the breakup of former empires of former states, but also the creation of new states. Do you remember? Can you tell me which new state was born around the end of the First World War? We have seen that two big empires broke up, but in addition, one important state was created at that time. Any idea? It's a country that is on the front pages of the papers.
It's when the US, the United Socialist Republic broke up.
Exactly. At the end of the First of the World War, the United Socialist Soviet Republic, the USSR, was established. We have a question by Kylie. Kylie?
No, sorry, I was just going to respond to the question the USSR
okay.
as well. My apologies.
Excellent. So the USSR was created by a consolidation of a number of states, particularly in principle, what was formerly Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, that through a treaty, created the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and then at the same time, then through another treaty, the Caucasian republics, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, also joined the Union of Socialist Soviet Republic. So at the end of the World War, there was not only the breakup and the creations of new states, but formerly independent states created, joined one single country. So we have a lot of problems of state successions here. And talking about the Austro-Hungarian Empire, do you know who was Otto von Habsburg? Otto von Habsburg.
Yes, it was the last emperor, and the last emperor. Technically, he was a child. But,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Otto
nominally, he was the one that signed the dissolution of the empire.
Exactly. Otto von Habsburg was the last inheritor of the Austro-Hungarian crown of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was the last successor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. When the Austro-Hungarian Empire broke up, split up, he has to flee with his family. He lived most of his life in exile. But then when he grew up, he became a convinced promoter and advocate of the European Union, and he was a parliamentarian, a European Union parliamentarian. Otto von Habsburg died relatively a few years ago, I guess 2010, and he gave one of his last interviews to a paper. I can't remember what was the paper, and there in that interview, he talked about his life in exile, what was the life of a person that was to be an emperor, and then he was almost nothing, and so on and so forth. So it was a very nice interview. And at the end of the interview, the journalist asked him or tell him that that night there was a match, a soccer match, a football match. The journalist told him, tonight, Austria and Hungary are playing in the context of the qualifications for the World Cup, I guess. And he replied, Austria-Hungary is playing against whom? I don't know you because he in his mind, still thought that it was a joke, of course. He still thought that he was that Austro-Hungary was one country. Well, that was the first way. Then we have a second way of state succession. When do you think that the second wave took place, more or less? First wave, first period of state succession after the First World War. Second, the second.
When the Commonwealth countries started to separate from the UK, or there were like more countries being born.
Around, it's a little bit exactly, but a little bit broader. Do you know how that period is called more generally?
Decolonization?
Exactly. During the decolonization process after the Second World War, not only countries that were former colonies from the United Kingdom, but also from France, Portugal, some colonies of Spain gained independence. Immediately after the Second World War, we had about 50 countries in the war. Around 50 countries were the countries that signed the Charter of the United Nations, and now we have more than 200 countries. So this dramatic increase in the number of countries completely changed the nature of international relations. But this was exactly the second wave of state succession, which, because of the nature of the decolonization process, it's introduced some particularities. We will address very soon. And then we have a third wave, a third period, when that period had happened. A third period, the wave of state succession, where a lot of new states were created. And
at the end of the Cold War.
Exactly, at the end of the Cold War, exactly. At the end of the Cold War, we saw the breakup of the former Soviet Union into a number of different states, independent states. We had, after the end of the Cold War, we also see the complete dissolution of certain states, for example, Czechoslovakia, because the successors of Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic and Slovakia, they do not consider themselves as successors, as continuing the state of Czechoslovakia. So Czechoslovakia was completely dissolved, and also the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia were completely dissolved. This is a particular instance of dissolution of a state. But after the end of the Cold War, we not only see again the partition, the separation of one state into two or more states, but we also see what at the end of the Cold War? Not only partition, separation, dissolution of states, but what happened in this very important. As in the case what happened in the First World War, that we saw the breakup of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire, but also we can see the creation of a new state, which was the Soviet Union. Something similar happened at the end of the Cold War. We see the breakup of many states, but also what? Please.
The Constitution of the European Union, the formalization or the creation of some regional forums that we are making like by treaties, like for example, Mercosur was not an state, but an organization that it was merged through a treaty. So states started to willingly cooperate with each other.
Could be the European Union is not per se a state, but let's put the European Union aside for 1 minute. This is much more important after the Cold War. Very important.
Jenny has her hand raised.
Jenny?
Yeah, yes. Maybe the reunion of Germany, because like some treaties.
Exactly.
some-
The reunification of Germany. We had two different states that then were reunified and became one state. Exactly. Thank you, Jen. And maybe now, so we have these three waves, you know, after First World War, after Second World War, after the Cold War. Maybe now have the chance, or maybe we now in a moment, in a historical moment, where we could see a fourth wave in state succession by the ways of separation, of unification. What do you think? Any recent, very recent cases of state succession, separation, unification? Attempts, failed attempts.
I was thinking on the Brexit.
Well,
and the European Union doing a lot of treaties,
exactly.
and then what's going to happen with the ones that the UK was part of?
The Brexit, exactly. The Brexit, like the constitution of the European Union, is not technically, you know, a case of state succession, because the European Union is not a state in the sense of in the context, in the concept of international law, but there are very points in common, you know, the creation of the European Union and the separation of the United Kingdom from the European Union has many points in contact with the theory of state succession. But Gail, again?
Well, you've seen in Scotland, there's been referendums, there's been creation of South Sudan, and lots of other secessionist movements. Exactly.
We have the creation of South Sudan, the separation of South Sudan from North Sudan, and we had also attempts at separating, for example, Scotland from the United Kingdom, which there was a referendum not so long ago, which the separatist movement, let's say, failed to get its objectives. And we have another attempt at Tim.
Okay, I'll use one microphone at a time. Sorry about that. A question I had about that was where it's not necessarily state succession, but rather the regime change in Afghanistan of like a new government.
Yeah, there is a principle in international law that says that the change in the government does not affect the nature of the state. So the state continues as it is, as that state is, regardless the government. So the change of government is not one of the features, the phenomena that we have to take into consideration when we talk about state succession. When the government changes, the state continues. This is the principle of the continuity of a state, regardless of the government. But I wanted to mention, in addition to Scotland, another attempt, recent attempt, not successful. Yes, Juan.
Catalonia.
Exactly, Catalonia. You remember
Flanders in Belgium did the same. Flanders didn't arrive to the point of the referendum, but they are trying to separate from Belgium. Yeah. Okay.
So Catalonia, you remember there was an attempt to have an election that the central government intervened. What I am mentioning these attempts, because it's probably that these issues of state creation, new states separating from all states, or two states, for example, Yemen, South Yemen and North Yemen became one state. So we will continue to witness these I don't know if problems, but these developments, you know, in international relations and international law, of state separating from all states, state reuniting with another state. So that maybe sooner or later we will see a fourth wave. Okay, and this matter of state succession is so important. Because it goes to the heart of one of the key issues of international relations and international law, which is the very notion of state, of nation state. One of the key concepts of international law is the notion of state and nation state, because nation states are the key players of international relations. So one of the key features, the key concept of international law is what is a state. You remember what is a state? You should know by this time of the course what is a state. What is a nation state? What is the concept? What are the elements or the elements of an entity that an entity must meet in order to become a nation state? I will help. We need
basically there is the most used reference to define a national state is the Convention of Montevideo of 1929. Exactly. But it's not a universal definition accepted by the United Nations. Has been attempted, but the one from Montevideo is the one that we can accept as a definition of what the state needs to have.
And what need to have?
Well, a limited, an established territory.
Okay. Wait there. Territory.
Population.
Population living in the territory. What else?
A government.
Government.
A government. Any kind of government.
A government accepted by other governments.
Exactly. That government has to be recognized by another government. And we may also add that the government has to effectively control, effectively govern, the territory and the population. Because if we have a government that does not control the territory, what will we have? A concept which is very in fashion these days. If we have a territory, a population, and a government, but the government does not control effectively, cannot impose the rule of law, cannot control anything, what will we have? If we have a territory and a population, but not an effective government, we will have a
failed state.
Failed state, exactly. A failed state that you have heard about this concept, I'm sure. Okay, so that is the concept of nation state, the key player of international law, international relations, and it's a key concept of international law. And state succession to treaties, and state succession somehow deal with the modifications, with the alterations of this basic concept, which is a state, because a state may lose part of one of its central elements, the territory, and become another state. So international law is not only devoted to the idea of a state and the relationship between different nation states, but also with the problems generated by the changes, by the alterations in the nature of the state, and when a state becomes another one. So that's why this problem is so important, and the succession of the state generates a number of problems that international law, that the legal system try to solve, because in a way, a law tries to solve problems. It's a tool to solve problems, and international law is a tool to solve international problems. For example, as we very briefly mentioned before, one of the first questions that arises when we have a case of a state succession is the question on whether the treaties in force in the old state continue to be applicable in the new state, where the rights and obligations acquired by the former, by the predecessor state, are still applicable to the successor state, to the new state. This is one. Are all the treaties in force are still applicable to the new state, or none of the treaties applicable to the former state, to the predecessor state, are applicable to the new one? Then, what happened with the third states? If you have country A enter into agreement with country B, but country B then split into B and a new state C are the treaties that to which state A were a party still applicable, still in force with the state C, with the new state created out of state B? What happened with the third parties? Are they still bound by the treaties they signed with the predecessor state? This is another question. And what happened with the population of those states? The population of the new created state still enjoys the rights acquired when they were a population of the former state, especially talking about human rights treaties. You know, one state signed a treaty ratifying a human rights convention. So the population of that state is entitled to a certain number of rights. But then this state separated and a new state is created. The population of the new state still enjoys those human rights that were acquired under the previous state or not. So these are these are the kind of questions that this issue of state successions try to answer. Of course, and this is very important, we will find the answers to all these questions not only in international law, not only in treaty law, but also in constitutional law. And we will see some examples. Okay. So we have posed the problems that state successions bring, you know. And we will try to answer those problems, try to solve those problems. And for that purpose, we have two basic principles in international law and in state succession. We have the principle of the universal succession and the principle of clean slate or tabula rasa. These are the two basic principles of state succession, and all the answers that we may find in all this complex matter may be reconduced to these two basic principles. The principle of universal succession means that what? Universal succession. What do you think this means? In the concept of state succession, we have one state, and then we have another state born out the first state. Universal succession.
That both countries that were born will acquire the same treaty that was signed?
Exactly. That means that the new state, the successor state, born out of the predecessor of the old state, will inherit all the treaties that were in force in the predecessor state. All the treaties, all the rights and obligations that belong to the predecessor state. The defenders of these positions argue that this contributes to the stability of international relations and the legal relationship, because everybody will know, that the legal relations will continue despite the creation of new states. This theory, I believe, that also has some roots in the old Roman law, of succession in the person, in the individual. Because in the old Roman law, the son was somehow the continuator or continue the personality of the father, and the son will inherit all the rights and obligations that belong to the father. And this idea of succession at the individual level in the Roman law was transplanted to the international realm. So this idea came from that. This idea, yes, please, Timothy.
Timothy has a question.
Yes.
Could you please provide a modern example of that
Yes.
universal principle?
Yes, yes. This issue of state succession is as we mentioned before, is relatively new, only 100 years ago, and because of that, it's not that settled. So the principles, we have very undisputed principles in this matter. You know, differently from, for example, the state-making process, and where you will have the negotiation, signature, ratification, and those are principles universally agreed. At the state succession level, we will not find that many principles that are undisputed and completely settled. Where we will find the applicable rules? We will find the applicable rules in another Vienna Convention, the Vienna Convention on State Successions to Treaty. You know, and with this convention, we will find the third convention on treaty law signed in Vienna. The first is the Vienna Convention on the law of treaties that we have discussed at large here. Then we have the Vienna Convention on the law of treaties between states and intergovernmental organizations that we made a reference in one of the lectures. And then we have another Vienna Convention related to state succession to treaties. This Vienna Convention to treaties, it was not that universally accepted, and it has not that many number of ratifications. So because of that, we have always have to refer to a state practice and to customary law. But as we mentioned before, between the First World War, the Second World War, and the end of the Cold War, all these principles have changed, and because of that, it's difficult to find undisputed principles. But this principle of universal succession is explicitly accepted by the Vienna Convention of the State of Treaties, and in every instance where you have one state, and you have, and from the territory of one state, another state is created, in those cases, the Vienna Convention on the State Succession to Treaties established that the successor state will inherit all the treaties that were enforced in the former state. So in the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaty, this principle of universal succession has been expressly recognized and expressly accepted. Of course, this is in principle, because in all these matters of the state succession, we will find general rules of international law. But then, in most of the cases of a state succession, we will find a treaty, and a specific treaty between the states that are being separated. And in those cases, the state will establish their own particular rules for that state succession. We will tell a little bit more about this in a few minutes. But we find the universal declaration, the universal succession theory or doctrine. And against this doctrine, we have the clean slate or tabula rasa theory. What do you think this means? Clean slate.
Basically, it's like it starts over again. So
Exactly.
none of the treaties are recognized.
Exactly. That means that the new state will not be bound by any of the treaties that were enforced in the predecessor state, and will start anew. Which country do you think has promoted this theory or this principle? Because it's completely the opposite. Which countries do you think that will have an interest in not being bound by any of the treaties that were enforced in the predecessor state? Come on. Yeah, please, Juan.
I know the case of Latvia was one of those countries. They didn't wanted to have, and Lithuania and Estonia as well, but
Yes.
Latvia was particular match because nowadays you have 25% of the population, which it is still living in Latvia, but they are apatridas. Yeah, they doesn't have a nationality and so on because they, although speak stateless. Yeah, they do not have access to Russian nationality, but they do not have access to Latvian nationality either. So there was not succession on the terms of law or nationality.
The Baltic states are claim historically that theory, but this is a little bit older. But it's related. Is I will help you politically. The reasons brought by the states who promoted this theory are very similar to those of the Baltic states. But again, which country do you think will have interest in not being bound? We don't want to have nothing to see with our predecessor state. Which countries will be interested in that? We are not interested in having anything to do with our predecessor state. Which countries will claim that, will be interested in supporting?
All the former USSR states.
All the
former Soviet Union states, the former Soviet Union states?
Not all of them. We will come to the Soviet Union. Not all of them. The Baltic states, yes, but some of the Caucasian republics we are not that concerned about that. Okay, I help you again.
The Yugoslavians? Sorry.
Is a little bit older. All the states that were born out of a revolutionary process of a revolutionary war, mainly the United States of America, says, look, we have fought a war in order to liberate ourselves from our colonial power. In no way we will apply the treaties that were signed by the United Kingdom. So all of the countries that were born out of revolutionary process claim the theory of the clean slate. We are not bound by the colonial ruler at all. None of the treaties will apply to us. This principle was then followed by the newly independent countries that were created during the decolonization process, mainly African and Asian countries. And this principle of clean slate is again recognized and expressly stated in this Vienna Convention on the States Accession to Treaties, which has two categories. One is the category of the separation of a state from the territory of another state. In the case of, for example, Ethiopia and Eritrea, of the countries from the former Yugoslavia. In those cases, in principle, the universal theory applies. But in the case of newly created states created out of the decolonization process, the principle of clean slate applies. These are two different categories established in the Vienna Convention on the States Accession to Treaties. Of course, again, these two principles are two, let's say, pure formal principles, which in practice are never applied in such a purity manner, because even states that has born out of revolutionary process, out of the independence war during the decolonization process, even those states will still apply treaties that were signed and negotiated by the colonial power, the colonial ruler, including expressly boundary treaties, and treaties regarding the navigation of rivers. So these two principles, universal succession and clean slate, are two abstract principles, which in reality never applies, because in most cases, when there is a separation, some treaties will still continue to apply to the successor state. We are running out of time, so I will try to speed up a little bit. We have talked a lot about separation of states. I would like to briefly discuss the reunification of the unification of states, a process according to which two states became one state. In the case of unification of states, we have a classification or a subdivision. Unification of states, we may classify them into incorporation and merger. Incorporation and merger. There are two different categories. Incorporation will be the case of the reunification of West Germany with East Germany. Why is this an incorporation? Because in the treaty, in the unification treaty between the Federal Republic of Germany and the Democratic Republic of Germany, in that treaty, and again, we have general rules of international law, and then we have specific rules which are set in the specific, in this case, in the specific reunification treaty. In that treaty, it was established that between East Germany and West Germany, it was established that all the treaties in force in West Germany will be extended, will be applicable to East Germany. All the treaties will apply to East Germany. But none of the treaties in which East Germany was a party to will be applicable to West Germany, unless there is an express decision in that matter. So if it was not a merger on an equal footing, as was the case, for example, of South Yemen and North Yemen, according to which all the treaties in force in South Yemen will be applicable to North Yemen, and vice versa. All the treaties applicable to North Yemen will be applicable to South Yemen. In the case of the reunification of Germany, it was more than incorporation of East Germany into West Germany. And once that treaty was signed, what will be the next step, or what was the next step? You should know this. East Germany signed a treaty with West Germany. They reached an agreement on a number of things. Okay, next step.
To inform the UN and apply for a seat as a new country? No?
No. You have first step, negotiation. They negotiated, signature. Following step.
The ratification.
The ratification. By whom? By which
Well,
authority?
in this case, it depends. In some processes, they first call an elections and they choose and they merge the authorities to do. In some cases, they could do before the secession, the parliament of one side and the other, they ratify,
Exactly.
and then they call to elections, and the new parliament also do the same.
Exactly. In the case of the reunification of East Germany with West Germany, there was negotiations, there was the signature by the executive branches of each state, and then that treaty was subject to ratification to each parliament, the parliament of West Germany and the parliament of East Germany. Each parliament had to ratify. Remember the ratification instance in the lawmaking process of treaty. And each parliament ratified, of course, that treaty. But to my surprise, I will expect an unanimity in the votes during the ratification process, but it was not the case. In the parliament of West Germany was something 400 votes against 40. It was a vast majority, but still there was parliamentarians that voted against the ratification. And in the case of East Germany, the same. It was about 300 in favor and something like 90 against. I would have expected unanimity, but not. There were some parliamentarians in both sides that voted against. So that was the reunification of West Germany through. But what happened with the constitution? What happened with the constitution? What constitution applies? The West Germany constitution or the East Germany constitution? And what happened with the currency, the Deutsche Mark? which currency will apply? The West German currency or the East German currency? The West German currency was much stronger. And what happened with the property law? You know, the buildings, apartments that were property of an individual were confiscated by the communist government of Germany. Can they be returned to the original perpetrator? All, you know, I am mentioning this as an example of how complex a reunification process could be. You know, it's not on, and it's not only a matter of international law, but also a matter of constitutional law, a matter of commercial law, a matter of family law, a matter of family. Well, this is just to talk a little bit about separation. So, and very briefly, just to finish, because we are almost on time, and I would like to save a couple of minutes for the paper. If we have to make a taxonomy of cases of state succession, we may find, you know, unification, including incorporation and merger. We may find separation, Ethiopia, Eritrea from Ethiopia. We may find dissolution, complete dissolution of the Czechoslovakia. We may find completely new states, the states born out of decolonization process. And then we have the instance of transfer of territory, which is when one country, when one state transfer part of the territory to another country. For example, Russia transferring Alaska to the United States in 1879. So of course we need to leave a lot of things, you know, in the air, but these are the basic principles of state succession. I hope that, yeah, in my point of view, it's a very interesting topic to discuss, but we will leave it there. Please let me know if you have any doubts regarding any question regarding this particular topic, and if you will have some questions, some concerns, some issues regarding the final paper, methodology, topic, whatever you would like to discuss. Jenny.
Okay, I have a question regarding the paper.
Yeah.
You in the syllabus, it's, wait, I need to open. It's like the criteria for assessment. It says like it's integration of personal and social experiences. It's 25% of the paper. What does it mean?
No, this what I wanted to do is that you pick a topic, you choose a topic that is of your personal interest, because it's a matter that concerns your country of nationality, your country of residence, or because you have a personal interest in that because you work on that field, or because you were involved in a situation regarding that. So that's my point, you know, because is if, in addition to the theoretical analysis of a topic, you can also include your personal touch, you know, the paper becomes definitely much better. So that's my point. But yeah, in any case, if you don't want to discuss something which you have a personal knowledge of, and you want to discuss something completely, you know, theoretical, it's okay also, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, questions regarding your the paper, please. I really appreciate if your paper, first of all, is paginated. So please insert page numbers. Then, if you can put a summary, you know, a summary of an index of the topics you will discuss, it will be wonderful. And please follow the traditional structure, you know, introduction, body, conclusion. It is very important that in the introduction you state what is the purpose of your paper, of your research. Then you develop in the body all your ideas, and you sum up, wrap up, you know, in the conclusion your final thoughts. Yeah, Elizabeth.
It was just a follow-up on the former question when you talk
Yeah.
about like having your own personal touch.
Yeah.
Would it be appropriate to include one's own personal recommendations, perhaps if there's like a discrepancy in the rollout of the treaties or in the disputes, or not appropriate?
No. My idea, but again, it's just a suggestion, is that because most of the students of this course are working on international connected, matters. So if you take this chance to develop, your practical knowledge of some issue, and you add some theoretical analysis to that, is very good. But that's my point. That's my point. But again, if you want to discuss the problem of fishing between New Zealand and Australia, it's okay also. Timothy.
Would that include speaking? I typically try to refrain from speaking in the first person and in academic paper, but
no, please refrain. My point is the following. Let's say that you are working on I don't know, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and you are now, working on some problems related with refugees, So if you are in that situation, it will be wonderful if you analyze, some treaties regarding the protection of refugees, or what happens if one country violates that treaty, because you have in-hand knowledge of that, That's my point. If to your in-hand, experience, you can add a theoretical reasoning on the problem, then it's wonderful, because you have both, sides of the problem. That's my point. That's my point. But because in the previous courses, I learned, that most of the students have or are working, or have worked before, or are planning to work in some related international law related area. So if you can discuss that, is wonderful. But again, if you don't want to discuss a personal matter, and you prefer to discuss some very theoretical issue, it's fine also. Jenny and Elizabeth, I don't know if you still.
Yeah, thank you, because I don't have the experience, because I'm not working in the international field. So for me, it's a little bit like difficult to actually bring personal experiences in it.
Yeah.
The paper is definitely due until Sunday midnight, right?
Sabrina, how are we doing with the deadlines?
Yes, indeed. This is why we're also going to share this recording as soon as the cloud sends it to us, so we can share it with Pramila. So you have all the documents.
Just a small question. I got your feedback this afternoon. I'm not at home, I'm not in London, and I have a huge time difference with Costa Rica. So I don't have my academic papers with me, and I just got your feedback. I have only few of my things. So if I have to change something on my essay, could be possible that I submit it on Monday, because of the time difference, it's impossible for me to be it on time. I'm gonna be flying.
Sabrina?
If you could please send an official email request, and then we can.
I did. I just sent it this afternoon and so on. So yeah.
Then we'll take it up with your piece from our side, certainly not an issue. I hope your piece also sees it the same way, but I'm certain, given the current circumstances, fingers crossed. If not, bounce it up to us again, please.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jenny, you have another question? Because your hand is there. So, okay, so relax, enjoy, try to write something. Again, this reference to personal things is because when you are writing regarding something that touch you, or that you are involved in, it's much easier, you know. If you have to discuss, you know, the treaties applicable to the exploration of the moon, it's a little bit more difficult, you know, because there are treaties that apply to the moon. That's my only point. But relax, enjoy, try to write something. Most of you has been really genuine in your opinions, in your interactions, in your discussions, which I really appreciate that. So if you can produce a paper that is also a product of your own self, it will be wonderful. Okay, so Sabrina, are we okay? Are we closing?
I think we're closing. I just wanted to thank everyone for your great contributions in the first and in this webinar and as well online. Wish you all the best of success with the remainder of the course and the remainder of the courses. Very much looking forward to seeing you all again soon in a different course. And if you have any question or query, please feel free to just reach out to us, and we'll try to make everything possible within the limits that we are unfortunately having.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very happy to share this experience with you. I hope we meet again soon in a way or another.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
weekend.
Professor. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
all.
much.